Alright, so I'm going to go over some of the basics of the lesson for 1.R.6, which deals with the real number line, okay, and absolute value. So remember, our number line looks something like this. It represents numbers across basically everything, all our real numbers that we have, from where we can have negative numbers and we can have positive numbers. So normally you can represent 0 in the center of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but it does pass through 0. Over here you would have your positive numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and over here you'd have some negatives. -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. Okay, and it continues on forever. Well, just because some of these numbers are labeled doesn't mean that they're the only numbers on here. Like, we can have a point on +3 here. We can have a point here on -1. We could also have decimal points, like if we wanted to know where, let's say, -4.5 was. Well, we would know that that would have to be halfway between the 4 and 5 on the negative side. Okay, so -4.5 would have to be right here, -4.5. If we wanted to know where +2.5 is, that would be over here in the positive side, between 2 and 3, halfway, so 2.5. Okay, so you should be able to pretty much figure out where any point would be on the number line if you were given it to you on some of the homework examples, which they do have some like that. Now, just so we are understanding like how these negatives and positives work, it's going from least to greatest. So everything over here is basically a smaller number than what's going to be on the right side. So negatives are always going to be, of course, smaller than positives. So as the negatives get bigger, they're really getting smaller. So even though the numbers are getting bigger, they're getting smaller. So you should be able to tell like how two numbers are going to be associated with each other. So they may ask you to use these symbols. Remember, we have this, our less than symbol. We have this, which means greater than. And we have our equal to. So it may ask you to represent some of these numbers by setting up a true statement. So like they may want you to use these symbols to show that what type of relationship, so let's say these are some examples, what type of relationship we have between 1 and -3. Well, 1 is positive, 3 is negative, so of course the negative number has to be smaller, even though it's a bigger number than 1, meaning that our opening is going to have to go towards the bigger number, so that would have to be going this way. So 1 is greater than -3, so you'd be able to either click on or enter in that greater than sign. Okay, so something like -50 and -2. Okay, now these are both negative, but remember, the bigger the negative number is, the smaller it is. So our opening would have to go towards this way for this to show that this is the bigger number. So that would be -50 is less than -2. Okay, so then another thing we'll go into is how our absolute values are going to work. So let's say we have the absolute value of something. That's what these symbols are. So these are absolute value symbols. Okay, the absolute value is basically something that's going to find the distance of something on the number line. So distance from 0 on your number line. Okay, so if we have our number line, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3. If we wanted to find the absolute value of -2, well, the distance from 0 on the number line would be 1, 2 units. Okay, a distance is always positive, meaning that this is going to have to be a positive 2. Okay, if we have the absolute value of positive 2, well, same thing, the distance from 0. So 1, 2, that's still 2 units, meaning that the absolute value of positive 2 is also still positive 2. Okay, an absolute value should really never have an outcome of a negative number because it's always representing a distance. So normally you're changing your negative to a positive, your positive is going to stay positive. Okay, and that's why, because of the way the number line works. So that goes for any type of number. If we have negative 5.8, the absolute value of that is going to be a positive 5.8. If we have the absolute value of 4/5 fraction, also again going to be a positive 4/5. Okay, it doesn't change the value of the number, it just makes it basically positive. If it's already positive, it's going to stay that way. Now if we have two negatives, like on the outside, negative 10, let's say. Well, the absolute value of our -10 is positive 10, but this negative is going to still have to stay with the 10. Okay, -10 would stay because of the way that negative was on the outside. It only does stuff to the inside of our absolute value. Okay, so that has to stay our negative. Okay. Now we can do the same thing we just did up here with some of this stuff. If we have absolute value of -5 blank absolute value of 5, if we'd want to say if this is less than, greater than, or equal to, well, you can determine what both of these are going to be. So this is number 4. And we're going to put one of these in this blank. Well, the absolute value of -5 is 5, so this is 5. The absolute value of positive 5 is also 5. So in this case, we'd want to put our equal sign. Okay, it'd have to be equal. Okay, if we have negative absolute value of 3 blank negative absolute value of -2. Okay, well, the absolute value of 3, we want to do the same thing, pick which one of these it's going to be, is 3, but we'll keep that negative this time. So this is 3, but you want to keep the negative that's on the outside. This one's going to be a positive 2, but you want to keep that negative that's on the outside of this. Okay, so if -2 is over here, -3 is over here, well, -3 is smaller than -2, so we'll say that this is going to be a less than symbol. Okay, so then another situation that might come up with the absolute value stuff is if we're setting the absolute value of x equal to something. Okay, well, there's different types of solutions that can happen with this. If the absolute value of x equals some type of number, it depends on what this number is, and they can have multiple solutions. So let's say that this value, this question mark, is a positive number. Well, that would mean that they'd have two solutions. If this question mark is a negative, they would have to have no solutions. Okay, absolute value can't equal a negative number. If this value is 0, Sorry, this is no. This one would have the one solution. Okay? So in other words, if they're asking us that question about this, they want us to know what would be the solution to absolute value of x equals 5. Well, there's two values that we can plug into x to make this work out. If we would plug in negative 5 into here, that would give us 5. If we plug in positive 5 in there, that would also give us 5. So that's why there's two solutions to this. So there would be a box that you would click off that would say two solutions. And then you would have to put what those solutions are. One would be x equals the negative version of that number. The other one would be x equals the positive number of that, the positive version of it. So you'd have both of these as a solution. Okay, there's two of them. Now if they want us to find x equal to negative 8, well, absolute value of this won't work out, because if we plug in negative 8 in here, that's a positive 8, so that doesn't work. Okay? If we plug in positive 8, that's still going to be a positive 8, so that doesn't work. Okay, so neither one of these are going to work out, meaning that there's no solution. That would be your only answer. You wouldn't have any boxes to fill in. Okay. And then if our absolute value of x is equal to 0, well, 0 can never be negative or positive. It's just 0, so you would just say there's one solution, and that only solution would be that x is equal to 0. 0 would be the only thing you can plug into there. Okay? So just to review with this stuff, make sure you're understanding where our negatives and our positives are on our number line, how they're working with this. If you have stuff like, let's see, this is extra. If you have stuff without absolute values and just parentheses, like you may have negative 3. Remember, this is like basically turning into a positive, because a double negative is going to always turn into a positive. So that's going to be a positive 3. Same thing with negative 2/3. Two negatives is going to make a positive, so it's a positive 2/3. So don't get that confused with absolute value. Absolute value, you keeping it because the inside is going to turn negative. So these are just parentheses. This stuff is absolute value with the line, so don't get those two confused. Okay, parentheses just means to multiply.